Hey, what's up? So, quite a few stores have been closing around the area. I think I've heard some news about stores closing in other areas, and it's probably definitely related to the economic times being a little bit challenging at the moment. Definitely challenging at the moment. And I can't help but wonder, sometimes I have this thought when I walk past a store, or if I drive past a store, I see a store, and I just think to myself, how is this how is this company still in business? Like what they sell, what it seems like they're offering, in my mind, like there's not a big enough consumer base to be profitable, and yet they're open. Sometimes it's inevitable that they do close, and then it doesn't seem surprising to me, but it might be surprising that they're open for as long as they are. Sometimes you might find notoriously bad locations where it's just like one shop opens, they have their little stint, it closes. A few months later, a new store opens, they have their stint, doesn't work out, it closes, new store, etc., etc. I think some locations just aren't very good or conducive to a profitable business, or maybe the business just wasn't strong enough, or it wasn't a good enough business for that location. I know sometimes when you can find stores in clusters, which is kind of counterintuitive, because you would think stores in a cluster might be in competition, but I think there's kind of this other effect where if you put stores together, kind of like a mall, then it draws in more foot traffic. And I think that has some benefits. It's kind of like symbiotic. It's some kind of symbiotic relationship, I think, or some kind of mutual benefit. And yeah, I mean, even when you go to a mall, it's often like if you go to the food court, there's like McDonald's, KFC, or whatever. And you would think that they're competitors, right? And they probably are in their own right. And yet it somehow works, right? But I think I'm going off the point a little bit, but yeah, stores are closing. I think rent is probably expensive. That's always surprising to me as well. And I heard something recently from a video that I watched, and it said something about some stores are open, some luxury brand stores are open in these really expensive areas, and they're open at a loss. So they know they're losing money, or they know they're not necessarily making money from this store, but the marketing and the prestige of that location kind of helps with the brand, and it fuels further sales in other areas, whether it's online or maybe it's there for tourists, and then when tourists go back to their home, they might buy it from their store. That's an interesting concept to me. But yeah, I do think it's heading in a dangerous direction where smaller shops, like mom and pop shops, or just these kind of one-off non-franchise shops, are finding it tougher to survive. And I think what's the direction that it looks like it's going in, to my eyes, is that eventually it's just going to be the big players kind of eating up market share, and they're going to crush all these small players. And I think the only way these small players, medium-sized players, can put up any sort of fight is to be more technologically advanced, is to have a bigger presence in a way that maybe a big company doesn't have. Kind of like the David versus Goliath perspective. So for example, if if a store has tons of digital marketing and they're able to produce funny content or interesting content that draws people in, then that's going to do well for that company. If it's backed by an influencer, I also think that helps. I know influencers have gone on to kind of make their own company and sell their own product or service, and then because they already have an audience, it kind of helps make the business successful. But yeah, I mean, for a restaurant, you almost have to be on Google Maps, because I think a lot of people will search for restaurants online, and even with products, maybe even services, like you kind of still need that digital presence, whether it's an e-commerce store or if it's just some kind of landing site where people can get more information and more details about what is being sold. And yeah, obviously there's like Google ads and things like that that will help boost your site in search engines. But yeah, you definitely need something there, because I think just foot traffic alone, just kind of flyers or mailers, like that's outdated. And I think anyone who tries that, I mean, you might have some success, but my suspicion is that most people that are kind of in that category will get crushed by the competition. Yeah, you kind of got to keep up with the times, right? Oh, and one more thing with products, just adding this in here, is there's also a lot of international competition. So yes, there's local competition, but there's also a lot of international competition. That could be things like AliExpress, Temu. It could be a whole international brand or franchise of restaurants that maybe you didn't have to compete with, but now they've opened their flagship store where you are, and now they're competing. Yeah, international competition. I think international deliveries, all that stuff is, it's a competition out there. I also think in terms of consumption or buying products, I think adults get to a certain point in their age where they've got most of the things they need. Yes, they'll have things they want, but maybe, they don't need to be getting these things that they want. And probably they're mostly after things that, if something breaks, then they need to get something to replace it. Or like a piece of clothing rips, wears out, maybe then you want to buy some new clothes. But yeah, I feel like as you get older, there are less things that people need to buy. And then the focus kind of goes more towards food and experiences. And I think that's probably why, maybe services as well. And that's probably why in the newer generations, it's more like travel, experiences, and food, right? There's like things like food bloggers or not food connoisseurs, but like foodies and things like that. Like that kind of thing probably did exist maybe 10, 20 years ago, but it was a very minute set of people, whereas now everyone is kind of like a foodie in some ways. Lots of people take photos of their food, etc., etc. But yeah, I feel like that's kind of the direction where I see people going at the moment. That's where I see shops going at the moment. This is where I see shops struggling. And again, kind of going to that point before where I think if shops are together, they can kind of have this mutual benefit. If one store closes and another store doesn't take that place, then that's a little bit less foot traffic. Maybe another store closes, a little bit less foot traffic, another store closes, and then the whole area ends up being abandoned or much less fruitful as it maybe once was. And I think I've seen situations like this, areas like this. And yeah, I mean, it just seems to be going in that direction at the moment. Maybe I'm reading into too much stuff about things that I see locally, but yeah. Thanks for watching. See you next time.